Ever feel like you just want to like cut through all the noise and really get to the heart of what made someone significant, you know? Like what their impact was, what their deal was, all of that.
Oh, for sure.
Well, that is precisely what we are doing today.
I like it.
We're diving deep, 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 deep into the life and legacy of, well, I bet you know who I'm going to say.
I'm ready.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG.
Of course, yeah. A legend. I'm excited for this one.
Me too. So we've got, a bunch of stuff we've been going over.
Yeah.
Kind of an online tribute to Justice Ginsburg. And we want to try to figure out what made her tick, really what it was about her work, especially when it comes to, equality between men and women.
Right.
And why she's still like such a powerful figure for so many.
Absolutely. Her impact, I mean, it's undeniable, really, and it's lasting.
That's what we're going to get to the bottom of today.
Let's do it.
All right, so she was born, we've got to start at the beginning, March 15th, 1933.
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York. Now, it really seems like her upbringing, working class Jewish family back then, it must have really shaped how she saw fairness or maybe, the lack of it.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Growing up in that environment, it's bound to give you a very personal, understanding of disparities and why things like, equal treatment under the law are so important.
Yeah.
Those early experiences, they often stick with you and fuel a passion for justice that lasts a lifetime.
And her mom, Celia, seems like she was a huge influence.
Oh, yeah.
Really pushed education and supported Ruth's ambitions. And you have to remember, this was a time when women, they faced so many limitations just in terms of opportunities.
For sure.
I mean, for anyone listening who's into learning and growing, that kind of support early on, it's huge. You know what I mean?
It is. And what strikes me is her mother's foresight, Even with all the societal stuff holding women back at the time, she saw her daughter's potential, intellectual potential. That belief, that early belief, it can really set someone on an amazing path.
Yeah.
It did for Ginsburg, clearly.
So she goes to Cornell, graduates in 1954 with a degree in government. It feels like this is where she started to connect the dots between, the law and the struggle for women's rights.
Yeah, it makes sense. Studying government, you learn about legal structures, right?
Right.
But even more important, you start to see where those structures fail to deliver real equality.
Yeah.
And I think that's often where the push for change, for real change, begins, when you see that gap between what should be and what is.
And it was at Cornell, by the way, that she meets her husband, Martin D. Ginsburg.
Oh, right.
It seems like they had this amazing partnership.
Yeah.
Both in academics, professionally, while also, building a family life.
I can definitely see how that would be important for her.
I mean, that's a balance a lot of us try to find, right?
Yeah, for sure. Having a partner who supports you, especially early in your career, especially in a field like law that was so dominated by men.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, invaluable. It just shows how important personal support can be when you're trying to, smash those glass ceilings.
So then she goes on to Harvard Law.
Big step.
Harvard Law, one of only 9 women.
Wow.
In a class of 500.
It's hard to even imagine.
Can you imagine that?
Just picture it for a second.
It's like, whoa. The scale of the challenges she faced right off the bat.
Right. Being in such a tiny minority, in such a demanding environment, it would take an incredible resilience and just pure determination. And it wasn't just about the academics, keeping up with everyone else. It was about navigating a space that wasn't really designed for her or for women in general.
So she ends up transferring graduates from Columbia Law School.
Okay.
You would think top-tier education, she'd be set.
You'd think so.
But even then, the job market, it was brutal for her.
Really?
Simply because she was a woman.
Wow. It's mind-boggling to think about. But it really shows you the discrimination she fought against later. It wasn't just, a few bad apples here and there. It was baked into the system.
It was everywhere.
Yeah, it was part of the professional structures.
Yeah.
And those experiences, hitting those walls, they must have been fuel for her, to create a more just system.
Yeah. So let's dig into, the work she did, the groundbreaking work in gender equality, her time with the ACLU, the Women's Rights Project. It was massive in challenging this deep-seated discrimination we're talking about.
I mean, it was fundamental, right? The ACLU gave her a platform.
Yeah.
A strategic platform to take on these cases that would have this ripple effect, throughout the legal world. And her goal was bigger than just winning a case here or there.
Yeah.
She wanted to set precedents, legal precedents that would chip away at discriminatory laws systematically.
And one of the big ones, Reed v. Reed, 1971.
Oh, yeah.
Remind us about that one.
So Reed v. Reed, it was about, at its core, it was about something seemingly simple. Who gets to administer the estate of a deceased son.
Okay.
And back then, Idaho, they had this law that automatically favored men over women in these situations.
What?
Yeah. And Ginsburg, with the ACLU, they argued that this automatic preference, just because of someone's sex, violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Which means?
Which basically guarantees that states can't deny equal protection under the law to anyone.
So here's where it gets really interesting, I think, because while it might seem like, oh, it's just about estates, who cares? But what it did was it established this principle that even those seemingly small laws, they couldn't discriminate based on gender without a very good reason.
Huge, right, like a turning point.
It was a huge turning point in how the court viewed gender equality.
Yeah, think about it. Before Reed, the courts often worked under this assumption that men were just naturally better suited for some roles, even managing an estate. But Ginsburg's argument, and the court agreed with her, challenged that fundamental assumption.
Yeah.
They said, look, gender-based classifications, they have to have a real justification under the Constitution, not just some made-up reason.
Not just assumed.
Exactly. And that crack in the door, it was huge.
Then you've got Frontier v. Richardson, 1973. Military benefits. What was the issue there?
So in this one, she went after a policy that required women in the military to prove their husbands were dependent on them to get certain benefits.
Okay.
But men, they didn't have to do the same for their wives. It was totally arbitrary, treating men and women differently like that.
No kidding. And her argument, it was just so on point about how unfair and illogical this was, especially as women's roles in society were changing so much.
Right, like these old-fashioned assumptions about traditional gender roles, they were outdated and just plain discriminatory. And the issue wasn't just about the money, you know.
Right.
It was about tackling those underlying stereotypes that fed these unequal policies. You can really see her brilliance, her legal mind in these cases.
Totally. And it just becomes so clear that her work, it was bigger than individual cases. She was changing how the entire legal system understood gender.
Absolutely. She was building a legal framework that recognized gender equality as like a core constitutional value. Her strategy, her vision in those early years, it laid the groundwork for decades of progress in women's rights.
Yeah.
Decades.
So let's talk about her time on the Supreme Court, her judicial philosophy, her landmark opinions. What was it that guided her, would you say?
Well, it seems like a central idea for her was this. The Constitution, it's a living document.
Okay.
It should evolve with society, with societal norms to make sure there's fairness, especially for those who are marginalized.
Makes sense.
Yeah, she believed in a dynamic constitution, one that adapts to changing values while staying true to those core principles of justice and equality. And that perspective really shaped her approach to a whole bunch of legal issues.
Like Whole Woman's Health v. Hellerstedt, 2016, Texas abortion laws. What was at the heart of her argument in that one?
Okay, so in Whole Woman's Health, she was with the majority that struck down those restrictive Texas laws. And her opinion, it really leaned on this idea of the undue burden standard. She argued that those regulations, they created these major unnecessary roadblocks for women trying to access reproductive health care.
So basically the undue burden is like regulations can't create a crazy obstacle for someone exercising their fundamental right.
Right, exactly.
So it wasn't just about whether abortion was legal, it was about whether women could actually access these services without all these barriers.
Yeah. You can see that she understood that having rights on paper doesn't mean much if you can't actually use them, you know?
Yeah.
Her opinion showed a deep understanding of how these laws could really affect women's lives, their autonomy, their well-being.
Then you have Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, Voting Rights Act. This is one where she really disagreed with the majority.
Yeah, it was a huge dissent. So in Shelby County, the majority basically gutted key parts of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Yeah, they said it wasn't needed anymore because of all the progress in voting rights and racial discrimination.
Yeah.
Ginsburg, she was having none of it. She argued that you can't just ignore history, especially when it comes to voting rights.
Makes sense.
Right? And she said that getting rid of these protections was way too soon. It could even be harmful.
Yeah, it's like you can't just erase the past.
Exactly. And her dissent, it showed her commitment to social justice and, you know, her willingness to stand up to the majority when she thought they were messing with core principles.
So it's wild how she went beyond just being a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
She became this, like, cultural icon.
The notorious RBG.
Yeah. It's not every day you see a judge become so recognizable, almost like a celebrity.
It's rare. It speaks volumes about how deeply her work and her personality resonated with people, especially younger generations.
Right. It's like that nickname, Notorious RBG, borrowing from Notorious B.I.G., those lace collars. It's such a unique blend of like a judicial figure breaking into mainstream culture.
Yeah.
What do you think made that happen?
It's a good question. I mean, partly it was her dissents.
Yeah.
They were powerful, clear, convicted,
Mm.
and they really spoke to people who felt like they weren't being heard, who felt marginalized.
Yeah.
And the nickname, it captured her spirit, her fierceness, her dedication. And then you have the image of her, so different from the traditional stern Supreme Court justice. It made her seem more relatable.
Like someone you could have a conversation with.
Exactly. But it wasn't just the dissents, it was the logic behind them, the sharp, clear way she exposed inequality. She had this way of cutting through the BS, like with that line. We don't have a quote in our sources, so we'll skip the example for now.
Oh, yeah.
It really captured that feeling of her speaking truth to power.
And it inspired a whole new wave of activists, right? Especially around reproductive rights, workplace discrimination, LGBTQ+ rights. You can see her influence in so many movements today.
Yeah, totally. Her life, her work, it became a blueprint for how to use the law to fight for a more just world. Young activists, they saw in her this powerful role model, someone who was both brilliant and deeply committed to what she believed in.
And then the movies, documentaries, like on the basis of sex, they brought her story to an even bigger audience, right? Started these important conversations about fairness and equality.
Yeah, those portrayals, they humanized her.
Yeah.
Made her work more accessible to everyone. They helped people understand the challenges she faced and how much she contributed to American life.
It's a powerful story. So looking ahead, what do you think? What's her impact going to be on future generations?
I mean, it's undeniable, right?
Yeah.
She's inspired countless aspiring lawyers, judges, advocates, especially women going into law.
Right.
Her journey from facing discrimination to reaching the Supreme Court, it's a powerful message of perseverance. It shows that even huge obstacles can be overcome.
With talent, with dedication.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, her experiences with gender bias, they were just stories. They directly shaped her legal arguments.
Yeah.
They gave her this deep understanding of how discriminatory laws actually affected people in their lives.
So it goes beyond just the legal world, doesn't it?
Definitely. You see it in education, social movements, even policy discussions.
Yeah.
She changed how young people think about fairness and justice.
I think one of the most interesting things about her is her view on dissent.
Oh, yeah.
She saw it as so crucial for the law to evolve. It wasn't just disagreeing. It was about bringing in different viewpoints to make the whole conversation richer.
Right. She saw dissent as like planting seeds for the future of law. It's about saying, hey, there's another way to look at this, and showing where the law might need to change to keep up with the times.
And it gave a voice to the minority, which is so important in a democracy.
Right. Dissent makes sure that everyone's perspective is considered, that marginalized groups aren't ignored.
And her dissents, they often championed those who were most affected by the decisions, right?
Absolutely.
Like we talked about Burwell v. Hobby Lobby stores. Her disagreement there with corporations being able to deny contraceptive coverage based on religion, it really got people talking.
Oh, yeah. That was a powerful dissent. She argued it could really hurt women's health and their control over their own bodies. And it became a rallying cry for people concerned about reproductive rights. It's a perfect example of how a good dissent can shape the conversation and even influence future legal arguments.
And she believed that dissent could encourage future justices to revisit old decisions, keep the law evolving.
Yeah, she knew the law wasn't fixed. By disagreeing, by clearly laying out her reasons, she was basically setting the stage for future courts to maybe overturn those decisions.
Long game.
It was a long game.
It's pretty moving to think about all the tributes after she passed away in 2020.
It really was. The outpouring of grief, of admiration, it crossed all those political lines. It showed how much respect she'd earned over her career.
Like Obama called her a giant of the law.
Powerful statement.
Her influence, he said, would endure.
Yeah, and it speaks to how much she changed the American legal system, how many people's lives were touched by her fight for equality.
And Sotomayor, she called Ginsburg a mentor. a trailblazer who opened doors for women in law. It really highlights how she personally helped others.
Yeah, she wasn't just this big legal figure. She was someone who supported those who came after her, especially women trying to make it in the legal
And
world.
even that nickname, Notorious RBG, and all the memorials, it just showed this huge amount of love and respect beyond the legal community.
Right. It showed that she connected with people on a human level, that she gave them hope.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, I think it's safe to say Ruth Bader Ginsburg left a permanent mark on the legal world.
No doubt about it.
Her dedication to justice, to equality, to civil rights, it's something else.
Yeah, and the fight goes on.
It does.
She inspired so many. They're carrying the torch. It's her legacy.
And each of us, we can do something, right? We can be part of that movement, whether it's speaking out, learning more, or supporting organizations fighting for these things.
Absolutely. By honoring her dedication, we can all try to be champions for justice in our own ways.
Here's a final thought to chew on. Think of something happening in the world today, something you're interested in. How do you see those principles that RBG fought for, equality and justice, how are they playing out in that situation? And what about your voice, your role in shaping what happens? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
It was great to have you.
Yeah.
Until next time.
See you then.